Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Cassidy from Project Camelot. So I wanted to do an update that contains the article that I just wrote that was a reaction and analysis of the comments made by Dr. Shiva on the roundtable that Laura Eisenhower held with David Rodriguez and Dr. Shiva. And I was struck by the comments that he was making. He seemed to want to sort of dispense with Trump and basically say that Trump was working, like that it was a typical Republican versus Democrat contest, and that Trump had these alliances behind the scenes with deep staters, et cetera. And there's no doubt that Trump has what one might call a checkered past, but it is because of his checkered past that he is so well versed in the methods and operations of the deep state. And he also, of course, has grown up with the knowledge of Tesla and all of that because his uncle was deeply involved. So Trump is not as superficial as some people would like to believe. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and he has dedicated his life clearly ever since he became president to unraveling the deep state and revealing what's really going on with in essence the Luciferians, and that is what we're up against here on the planet. So I decided that I would do a video to accompany my article, draw people's attention to my article. It's still, early days, and I haven't done a ton of research with regard to all the things that Dr. Shiva, other things that he may believe or be thinking. He is a very intelligent man. He's got all kinds of credentials and also, I guess, a PhD or two, and or whatever, and so on. So, but I could see that other interviewers may be intimidated by his resume, if you will. That doesn't intimidate me at all. However, I do have an academic background that I don't talk about most of the time, but it has contributed to, obviously, the way I look at the world and some of my background in terms of approaching journalism and this type of thing. So I am trained in analyzing systems and taking a different approach with regard to looking at the exopolitical as well as political scene, including the socio-political scene that we find ourselves in here on planet Earth. And of course, then the accompanying many years in Project Camelot, in which I went way down all of the rabbit holes, you could even say, that are available out there pretty much. And I have to say that has, of course, enhanced my knowledge base in that regard as well. So I wanted to get into all of that. And I also want to say that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And I am still, following and looking into the work of Juan O'Savin, the many interviews with him that are out there. And I'm also looking at various other people, colleagues such as Simon Parks, and just a lot of other material out there. But I have to say, there's also on my Telegram channel, I keep people, I guess you might say, abreast of all of the news going on out there with regard to COVID. Now some Stanford, university doctors have come forward and saying there's absolutely no point in wearing masks at all. And of course, a very important video, and there's been many of them now, that depicts the nano literally under a microscope that's found on masks that are opened, just opened the package right then and there. And they tested 5 of those, what look like traditional medical masks that a lot of people are forced to wear, or consider themselves forced to wear, and very unfortunately contain nanofibers that are acting alive, which this has to do with the transhuman agenda, you know, and I don't think people understand what they're really looking at. And I've been talking about this for over a year now, actually, since, well, the transhuman agenda I've been talking about going back many years, but I've been talking about it particularly with regard to the whole genetic engineering side of the COVID plan. That does include, of course, the vaccines and the mRNA that's now being rolled out in vaccines, and accessing people's DNA, crossing the blood-brain barrier, and various things of this sort. So we're looking at, I mean, it's fascinating to see these various people coming forward, like this woman doctor, and I need to get her name, but I don't have it in front of me. And she does an excellent video where she's interviewed and talking about her shock over what is actually out there. There's so much, you know, so I have to say, and she did a number of tests to her credit, and using microscope, et cetera. So just want to draw your attention to those articles and the findings, which indicate that, of course, the masks contain this nano, and so do the vaccines. And so this is what we're looking at. That nano is AI. It's coupled with AI, and there's plenty of evidence that it is what they call gene therapy, which is, I think, a nice way of saying they're going to genetically manipulate your genome. So this is where things are headed. Now, I talked about this again over a year ago. I was just looking at one of my older articles that I wrote right when COVID first came out, because I tapped into this type of thing. I didn't realize it was going to be so obvious, but there was no doubt that it was part of the program. So indeed, this is what people are finding out, and this is only the tip of the iceberg, obviously. Now, that gets into the Illuminati deep state agenda that rolls into the secret space program and their plans for a humanity 3.0, et cetera. So this is the type of thing we're really looking at. And just want to say that it's important to realize that this is their plans for you, that unless you stand up and take a stand and refuse the vaccines, refuse the masks, that we are going down a very dark road at the present. And there are sides to the Trump administration where he was unable or unwilling to rock the boat in certain ways as a result of sort of his plan that he had put in place along with his team. And obviously he doesn't operate on his own, never did. He was in essence hired to do the job he's doing or has done. And this is all part of the scene. I do want to say that to Dr. Shiva's credit, he is encouraging people to take part, an active part in shaping their world and making social change that would be beneficial to all humanity. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I applaud that, and I would encourage it. So one of the things I did in college was specialize in social change, because that was a particular area of my interest, because I wanted to, from the time when I was a kid and got on this planet, wanted to change everything. So I began to study all of that in school and so on and so forth. So now I'm going to move over here. And so there was a very important video that came out of Turkey, a couple of Turkish journalists talking about the Evergreen boat, the container ship, and all of that. And I put it on to my Telegram channel with, I actually isolated the slides, froze them and isolated them as a slide presentation for people so that they could actually look at the slides carefully instead of just having the video going by so quickly because first of all, it's in another language, and second, it did have the subtitles. So it was important because the nature of what they were saying the containers contain, they make no mention of finding any human trafficking or child sacrifice there. Instead, they're talking about this, what appears to be a nanotechnology that involves the soil or some ingredient that's a chemical nanotechnology that would invade our soils and basically kill off cows so that it would completely eliminate the beef industry, and that humans would then have to have only fake beef, and that's like a program that they're planning. Now, I talk about the fact that if you don't know, that Gurdjieff had talked about in his books, and Gurdjieff was a famous, I don't know what you want to call it, mystics philosopher who lived many years ago. And one of the meetings with remarkable men is a film that made the rounds many years ago. You can still watch it. It's out there if you want to look on Amazon, I think it is. And tells you a lot about Gurdjieff and the various people he went around the world talking to and so on. But he was also, in a sense, I guess, at least loosely speaking, a yogi, and had activated his Kundalini as I have, and many others. And so his knowledge was absolutely prolific, and he wrote 3 very important books with very strange titles, called something like, actually I forget the name of them, but something like Conversations with Beelzebub, which is some kind of weird name. And perhaps it was a translation from another name, and from Russian, because I think he was Russian. At any rate, he talks about the importance of beef, especially for men, in keeping their sort of testosterone happening, so that they will also maintain their, I guess, manliness, whatever you want to call that. And that it was also very important for humans in general. If you lived on a planet that was all vegetarian, then beef and meat would not be as crucial. But since we do live with meat eaters, and that includes a lot of the Draco reptilian beings that are preying upon our species from underground and from interdimensional, then you would understand that we are up against a race of beings that regularly consume large amounts of meat. And therefore, the elimination of beef is a targeted hit on humanity's chakra that has to do with the will. And that involves, the will to take a stand, the will to stand up for who you are, and doing what you decide to do, having your own individual will. So this attack, if it had succeeded, and perhaps they will continue it and from other angles, but it was in this container ship, according to these Turkish journalists. And I don't have the slides in front of me, but it's, again, I put it on my channel. It's very important. No one has talked about this. I don't think it got picked up by any other news service as far as I could tell. And in it, it said it was 30 years of work on this particular kind of technology that sounded like it was almost some kind of insectoid or nano insect that was going to then infest once let loose from these containers, and in theory was on its way to the United States for one, and possibly there were other shipments that weren't intercepted. So this is very crucial information, and I'm concerned that it's not getting out there. So I just want to sort of footnote that, highlight it, and encourage you to go to my my Telegram channel. Now, Telegram is a social media. So there are only 2 social media that I'm allowed to be on anymore. And one is Telegram and the other is my Facebook. So I still have those Facebook pages. God knows how that even happened. And I'm still on Telegram. So that's why when I say I'm posting on Telegram, it's a great way to go through tons of news very quickly. And there are lots of channels over there. I highly recommend it. And so far, it's been relatively free. I haven't been interfered with, as far as I know, over there, as far as I know. Now, who knows how long that'll last, but it's worth noting. So actually, I guess I should also say that what's happening with my videos is that we had some trouble. We had to get another server, and we're waiting for it to be set up. It takes a couple days for the company to release it, I guess. Then they're going to be uploading the rest of my videos. So, the library is over 1,000 videos. It's quite substantial. We found we needed more storage space. So that's what's happening on my Project Camelot media library. And that's linked in the front page of Project Camelot, which is, I'll put it on the screen, projectcamelotportal.com, projectcamelot.tv, or projectcamelot.org. They all go to the same place. So if you go there, you'll see I have the Camelot library, and I'll put some images here so you can see what I'm talking about. And I still have my website, which has obviously got all of the videos and all of the work I've been doing for the last 16 years. What will happen is that the videos that are on the media library will also be embedded in those pages, but that's going to be a slow process. So if you're wanting to see Camelot videos right now, you should actually go to our media library. And there are at least, I think, around 500 up there right now, and there should be another 600 coming very soon. At the same time, it's a serendipity, call it a miracle, whatever you want to call it. Quite a ways back, when I knew my channel was threatened, I went out and signed up for lots of these platforms out there. And one of the things that I signed up for and then forgot about was actually this video website that's based on blockchain called Odyssey. And it's got a companion site called Library. It's spelled LBRY. And so that organization has somehow rescued YouTube channels, and it rescued mine. So it took all of the YouTube channel videos that I had published over the years, which was around 817, minus about a year's worth of work. So maybe minus about 100 videos. It uploaded them automatically to Odyssey. So you can now go to Odyssey and watch my videos, which are already up there and working wonderfully. So I'm very excited about that. I think you can do this thing where you tip me with crypto, and that helps finance us. And I'm not even sure how that works, but at any rate, if the link is going to be on the front page of Camelot. I will put it over there. And then we will have 2 places where you can watch Camelot videos. Now there's going to be a large number, around 800, even maybe 900 free videos. And then there's another 200 approximately that are very recent that will be part of the subscriber base. So part of the library, a large part is free. And then the more recent stuff is how we'll be charging. And you can access it if you choose to become a member. And it's very cheap. It's $3 a month, less than the price of a latte if you join for a year. And if you want just, it could be $4 a month if you want to join quarterly. And if you want to join on a month-to-month basis, you can pay $5 a month. So it's very, very low priced. And hopefully you'll find that is worth it to support my work and our work, and also to support keeping the channel alive, because now we are going to have to pay our own bandwidth, which we didn't have to do with YouTube. So we may have a way to put ads eventually on our pages, but at the moment we're still serving some Google ads on the website pages, but the actual media library does not have ads so far. So anyway, that's what's happening. Now, I want to go through this article with you and highlight these various statements that were made by Shiva, Dr. Shiva, because I think it's important that there is a lot of misunderstanding. It was clear that even during the interview that they did with him, that people are not quite understanding what it is Trump is really about versus what Dr. Shiva seems to think he's about, and the Trump team, what they're aiming at, and so on. So I think it's really important that the ball doesn't get kind of lost in the shuffle here, and that people start to tap into what's really going on. So the analysis of the roundtable with Dr. Shiva is going to go first. And I have a link to the video that was on, actually it's a Facebook link. I was hoping to get a link, and when I do get a link to the video and other platforms, obviously a lot of people don't go to Facebook, they're not able to watch Facebook. So I need another link to put on that article, and I will do that as soon as I get one. But at any rate, it's linked there, and you can go and watch it if you have access to Facebook. Now, what I did is I kind of numbered the issues that were highlighted in the conversation that they had with Dr. Shiva. And I do want to say as a caveat here that I have not analyzed all of Dr. Shiva's work and or seen all of his videos. I saw a number of them, especially in the early days of COVID. And then I've been watching a few more since then. So I hope that I am not mischaracterizing anything that he said or tried to promote on his interview with Laura and David. So to bear with me, so the first thing we talk about is he emphasizes, apparently he, I think he went to MIT, if I remember correctly, and he specialized in system analysis. So system analysis is a way of pulling back and looking at how different systems interact, as opposed to, it's kind of a very top level way of looking and understanding life on Earth, etc. You could even say, for example, there's the ecosystem, and then the ecosystem is made up of smaller systems, and those systems will interact with each other, and then larger systems. And so what I wanted to do was talk about how, whether if you're going to analyze a system, it's very important to have truth be your guide. And I don't just mean any truth. I mean the truth about what's really going on planet Earth at this time, so that in a sense, the context in which we find ourselves. And so you can't analyze a system without knowing the surroundings that the system is embedded upon. And in this case, of course, planet Earth, and then planet Earth being in a solar system, in a galaxy, in a constellation, and so on, and a multiverse, and so on. And that there are so many levels as well as dimensions that we're dealing with when we talk about planet Earth, and planet Earth also being planet Earth being part of what's called Gaia and Tara. And Ashiana Dean's books, the two Voyager books that are highlighted on the front page of my Project Camelot, cover this type of information very, very well. It's also covered in other places, such as, Indian philosophy, esoteric books of various kinds. So what I wanted to say about that is that what I noticed in Dr. Shiva's expose during the interview that he did he was not referring to the larger context in which we find ourselves. In fact, he was actually really focusing on life on Earth, specifically unique to the United States. He did briefly talk about some of the history of India that I think it was very valuable for people to hear, and how the caste system was actually eliminated and then brought back to further enslave the peoples of India. And I think that's very crucial information. So kudos to him for finding that. And I'm sure there's a lot more to it. But he really was concentrating on what we had looked at, what he has looked at in terms of the history of humanity, and especially the United States, and social change and how social change took place. And he was claiming that it took place as a result primarily of middle classes rebelling against the system. And in the United States case, where the middle class has a large number of guns, that makes them a formidable opponent to the New World Order. And while that may be well the case, it's still very important that we see these things in context. And you certainly can't deal with the Illuminati and their hold over humanity and only concentrate on the United States, because of course it's worldwide. And how that, how that Illuminati, cabal, globalists, how the globalists interact with our secret space program, and how that influences what life on planet Earth, but especially in the United States, how politics in the United States is hinged upon certain things in the deep state, and then the influx of the globalists, the Queen of England, the Vatican, City of London, and so on, and the financial situation around the world, the objectives 2030, the UN 2030 plan, and these kinds of things that are impacting what even people that are rebelling on the streets, demonstrating, and have been steadily throughout this COVID situation, how much they're able to actually achieve and how much they are able to change anything. At the moment, it doesn't appear that anything has changed because we have all had to live under these ridiculous lockdowns, although in some cases they have loosened, and various states have different levels of lockdown, et cetera, as you know, and others have more stringent rules and regulations. Europe seems to have gotten more, we're all under what is in essence globally a fascist syndicate, the globalists, which are fascists, but they're very fast becoming totalitarian at the same time. And we're moving quickly down that road in which technology facilitates greater control over humanity and over the elements, over the natural resources on planet Earth, and so on. So all of this is paramount. Now, so what I wanted to say was that truth had to be taking precedence in analyzing systems. And then I wanted to talk about how the secret space program impacts everything that is happening to us here on surface Earth. And a lot of that involves, the secret space program involves a lot of underground bases, off-planet bases on Mars and the moon, moons of Saturn and Jupiter, and then going outside our solar system. Much of that is unknown to common man or woman on planet Earth at the moment. However, there are plenty of us that do know about this and are, in my case, I've studied this in depth and had many, many whistleblowers from above top secret reporting in, so to speak, about this situation. So it can't be ignored. And therefore, any grassroots movement has to also realize the context in which they are acting in order to bring about social change, in order to even to make sense of their milieu and the things they're up against. So this is crucial. I also want to make the point that Trump and team are not operating as what Dr. Shiva seemed to be kind of caught in what is in a sense an old paradigm that did have the left and the right as being two wings of the same eagle that was run by the globalists. However, the whole point of Trump and his team is to, in essence, break that connection, to make our United States sovereign again, and to bring us back to some of the ideals, of course, of the Kennedy administration, for which Kennedy was killed. So this is the inspiration for what Trump and his team are dedicated to, and they are also constitutionalists, bringing us back to the original Constitution. So we've strayed very far away from all of that, and big tech has been partially responsible for that. Obviously, our military is fragmented. Some of the military are supporting this globalist agenda, and I talk about that in my article and have in other interviews and blogs, video blogs like this one in the past. So if you don't realize the objective of Trump and team, and you don't acknowledge, for example, that he signed an anti-child trafficking or human trafficking bill right when he got into office, that was actually one of the first things he did. And that is actually the inspiration, if you will, motivating him and people like Juan O'Savin and others who follow him closely and have dedicated their lives to this cause. So if you do not understand that we're at war with the Luciferian globalists, and that the war is over human trafficking, us being used as slaves, sex slaves, as well as food sources, adrenochrome sources, and so on. If you don't understand or are willing to talk about that, then you can't possibly understand what Trump and his team are really all about and why they make the decisions they make. So this is crucial. And so I highlight that. Then I get into the stolen election and the fact that what it seems, at least from my viewpoint, and I'm not completely, I find the delving into election results to be extremely boring. So, but I paid as much attention as I could. And I've read the Patrick Byrne book that was on the net about his saga, interacting with the Trump team and trying to work with Sidney Powell and bring forward the election being stolen, some of the pushback that he received. And I have to say that I think a lot of people who haven't possibly understood what the Q effort was even about do not understand that Q was not encouraging people to, quote unquote, do nothing. In fact, if you look at the Q reports, you will actually see that they encouraged a lot of action. And you have to actually go through and read those posts to understand what Q is really encouraging, which was by and large very educational and very positive. And I will say that that I think the Q effort was an excellent way for Trump to keep touch with his constituency in a climate in which the mainstream media would twist and lie about everything Trump said and did, including the rest of his team. So to understand the stolen election, it's also vitally important to understand that the real sort of nitty-gritty of this is technological. It's not, this one, these absentee ballots or whether dead people voted and so on and so forth. It's actually, how it was stolen electronically. And it was electronically stolen with the help of the Vatican and the Vatican satellites, and this CIA safe house in Germany, and had the input of other governments, apparently China, possibly Iran, and others, including Great Britain. And there is a portion of Great Britain that is always aligned with the dark magicians and the Illuminati and working against the sovereignty of the United States. And that's evident in some of the false flags that have happened. And there's a whole history there. And that includes Vegas, by the way. So when you're looking at this situation with the electronic voting machines, the issue that I find, and I think Juan O'Savin has stressed over and over again in several of his interviews, is that not only were the lawsuits thrown out of court, but they were thrown out based on the fact of who presented them, not based on the merit of the actual lawsuit. And that on top of that, the corruption of the judges and the control of the judges by the globalists is rampant and has been rampant in our society and in our world here in the United States for many decades. Okay, this is not a new occurrence. And so understanding that what Sidney Powell and her team, Rudy Giuliani and others have been up against is a system that was taken over maybe as early as the 1930s here in the United States and never actually came back to itself in all these years. And this was the same system that Kennedy wanted to take down. And that includes the financial system, the Fed, and the Fed being linked to, the IMF and the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, and all of this being a way to rule over the United States from a distance. And then the fact that these lawsuits, as far as I could tell, and I may be incorrect in this, I haven't examined them all, but by and large, it seemed that they focused on sort of boots on the ground, what happened here in the States, but they have not focused in the fact that it was stolen by foreign, in essence, other governments. And therefore, our United States has been invaded by other governments who tried to steer our election. This is very serious, and this is where the military should have come forward to set things to right, to defend our Constitution as they're dedicated to do, and stated so right on January 6th. And to say that they weren't prepared or didn't have the necessary data is actually a lie. They've had the data. They knew for 4 years before the election ever happened that it would happen the way it did. They actually knew that it would be stolen, and they knew it would, that Trump would lose. That had to be part of the scenario that they were working with. And so none of this was a surprise. The problem is that, and this is something that I think Juan, along with others, perhaps has been hiding, is that within our military, the generals were getting, and this came from a deep source of mine, what are called the spoils of war, and that they have been waiting to get their money from the Rothschilds ever since Trump went into office. He stopped those payments, making the generals very angry at him, many generals turning against him because they were being paid off for the war in Iraq, Iran, Syria, and the various wars, Afghanistan, one assumes, where the Rothschilds are actually paying the bills and paying off those generals. So in essence, those generals, for all intents and purposes, are traitors to the United States, and they're working for the Rothschilds. I mean, I can't understate how critical this piece of information is. And I realize that there will be generals out there who probably want to kill me just for saying this. But someone has to say it. And I was given this piece of information. I put it out on a previous video. There wasn't any feedback or waves or anything about it. I think they just as soon it got buried and went silent again. But the reality is that people that want to know why the military hasn't come forward to state to the American people that they have our backs, that our election was infiltrated by a number of foreign governments, and how it was done, and the fact that they have the evidence, which Robert David Steele clearly said they have all the evidence, they have all the votes, they know exactly how people voted, they know how they were twisted to go in another direction. So they don't need to do a recount, they actually have the data. And there's other people, I believe Juan O'Savin has said this as well, and so on. So when you look at the stolen election, you can't just look at some spelling errors on the part of lawsuits filed by Sidney Powell, if indeed there are spelling errors, and understanding the strain under which she was under, and the fact that, you know, these people have assistants that actually file the paperwork. So keep in mind that it's unlikely that Sidney actually sat there and typed the lawsuit. Okay, now, yes, of course, she should have had the proper proofreading, etc. I have no idea what went on with that. Maybe it was switched after the fact. Maybe she had no control over it. But to focus on spelling errors and miss the entire scenario that I'm talking about is absurd, and actually threatens one with thinking that perhaps there's an effort on the part of Dr. Shiva to misdirect the audience or something. So then we get into states' rights versus the Constitution. Now, in my opinion, the Trump team and their plan was too heavy on emphasizing the rights of states, but this was done purposely to make sure that Trump was never seen as a dictator who would come in there and make decisions for the states. And also, everything that they've done has been to demonstrate the level and how deep the deep state went in terms of corruption. So in order to do that, this is the method they chose. I am not a huge fan of their method, but I can say that you must acknowledge that this is the method that they chose, and they have been absolutely aligned fully behind it the whole time. And that involved trying to educate people, not by telling, but by showing, and by basically letting them see the depth of the corruption in our justice departments, in the executive, in all levels of government, and state governments and governors. And now we know which governors are complete traitors to America, who are in essence in the pocket of, again, the globalists, who again want to take over America, take away our guns. And this is a Democratic platform as well, unbeknownst to, I think, a lot of innocent Democrats who simply think that they, want, I don't know, freedom for fish and wildlife or something. There's a lot of naivete out there when it comes to the political system in the United States, and that takeover that has taken place going back to Jekyll's Island, as they would say. So understanding that putting the ball in the hands of the state did cause the governors who are traitors, again, to be exposed, such as the governor of California. But it also gave them way too much power, such that they were able to shut down their states substantially, while other states that had governors that were, loyal to the Constitution and to Trump, and who did not put in such stringent measures, and so on. So we've had a country that has been actually divided and fragmented by the emphasis on states' rights during an election season that was basically a federal election, a presidential election. And so showing also the faultiness of our election process, the machines that are incredibly faulty, the voting methods that are faulty, the fact that, we could be voting using blockchain, et cetera, that we have the technology to get an honest election to take place, but they didn't use it. That Trump's team, again, had decided to go with this idea of showing in this election how it was stolen. Now, there was another point that Shiva made about how Trump would go out and campaign and hold these rallies. And this was not a display of ego, okay, contrary to what everyone thinks. Trump is a great showman, yes. But the reality is that what he was doing was he was demonstrating his popularity in the eye of the whole United States and the rest of the world, so that when the election results came in and were lies in terms of what states went behind Trump, et cetera, that again, the steal would be obvious. So keep in mind that some of these techniques have been in order to create something else, in order to expose something on the dark side, and that this was the only way that they could see to do it. And there's reason to believe to some degree that his position with regard to COVID, the masks and all the rest, he definitely showed body language that indicated that he wasn't on board with that agenda early on during the COVID days. However, more and more as time went on, he tended to go along with the program, and he came up with this idea of jump-starting his own vaccine, which of course drove those other companies quite crazy. How much he knows, what he understood about the vaccine, whether that was a quid pro quo or a trade-off with what are in essence, the globalists. Because again, as I've said many times, you can't have mutually assured destruction. And you must realize that they killed Kennedy, they disposed of Nixon, they've actually interfered with our government in myriad of ways. They've assassinated a number of people, and they've had false flags, and Gulf of Tonkin, and even the Vietnam War was a sham. There is so much about our history that is basically a lie. And so all of this goes back to, what are you dealing with? And this is not as simple as having a bunch of truckers refuse to drive their trucks on a road and refuse to budge. Now, I am all for activism and social protest and civil disobedience. I am all for protest and civil disobedience, but it is important to know the context, again, within which this will operate. And it's very likely that what Dr. Shiva is working on and trying to educate people about the real way the politics goes, about what's really going on, about analyzing systems, is to know that he and his effort could support the Trump group, who are dealing with much larger issues than internal issues to do with the United States. So it's important to know that if you listen to Gene Decode, and even if you take even part of what he says having to do with the fact that there are so-called earthquakes at exactly 10 miles beneath the surface simultaneously around or in various areas of the world. This is a world stage. This is a world battle. 107 has said this. It's a planetary battle. It is a battle between good and evil. It is not a battle between left and right. And regardless of Trump's history, you can only see that as a benefit to what he is doing now and what he has been dedicating himself to. And there's plenty of evidence of this. So let's see, I'm just going to skim down here and see if there's anything else. it is clear that our United States has been taken over, as Jim Marr says, and wrote a book called The Fourth Reich. None of this is new to us. However, the gloves are off. The gloves came off around 2012, I would say, with the Illuminati and the deep state, and they began to surface in a very obvious number of ways, putting Obama in office when clearly he wasn't even born in this country, the fake birth certificate, etc. The fact that his wife is a man, and on it goes. Now, they're still doing these kinds of things. I mean, Biden, is, for all intents and purposes, most likely a clone. The real Biden may not even be alive today, and so on. So then I'm going to go down to I think I've covered all that. So, and it is important that Dr. Shiva did not seem to realize or to recognize the effort of the military that is aligned with Trump, and that they're still reporting to Trump, which should raise the eyebrows of anyone. And they are still invading various DUMBs, as they're called, deep underground military bases. And some of those DUMBs are alien bases, and they're undersea, they're around the planet. And this is a very important effort that they're still engaged in spite of a so-called switch in which Obama has, in spite of the fact that Biden is currently appearing to be in as president. However, he has no access to the real sort of keys to the kingdom, if you will. So I think I've covered most of my article. Please do read it if you're at all interested, and I encourage you to do your own research. There's a lot more to this discussion. I've invited Dr. Shiva to come on my show. I think that a debate between Dr. Shiva and 107 would be excellent. I think David Rodriguez suggested that on their roundtable, and I second the notion. So thanks as always for watching and listening, and have a good day. Bye-bye. Take care.